think that's the one.
Now, if your band only has one guitarist, or the song you are creating only has one guitar part, you may want to record the same part 2 or 3 times and layer them in order to get that fat metal sound. Pan one all the way to the left, one all the way to the right, and leave the last one centered. What you don't want to do is play it once and then duplicate the track multiple times. This method will not provide the stereo separation needed to get that full sound you're looking for. In this particular song, we've got 2 different guitar parts working together, producing harmonies as well as different accents. Your first thought may be to simply plug into the same amp and record your second guitar. The problem with doing that is that both guitars will end up with the exact same tone, which means they won't separate well at all in the final mix. In order to achieve separation and definition, you need to use 2 different tones. You can do this by changing the tone on the amp, or better yet, use a completely different amp. For this song, I'll be using a virtual amp modeler called Shred, which comes with Mixcraft. Setup for this track using an amp modeler is going to be completely different than it was for the last guitar. The first thing you might notice is, well, there's no amp. Instead, I'm going to plug into my guitar pedal and use it mostly for compression. No effects or distortion at all. The signal coming from the pedal is completely clean, also giving me the ability to push the signal if needed. For example, if your guitar is not equipped with active type pickups, you may need to raise the output on the pedal to make up for the slightly weaker line level signal produced by passive pickups. Using the left or mono line output, I'm going to plug the pedal directly into my mixer. In order to use an amp modeler and monitor your playing in real time, you will need an audio interface which comes with its own ASIO driver. The ASIO driver is written specifically to provide low or zero latency for the interface. What you do not want to do is download and install a generic ASIO driver to try getting low latency from your computer's onboard sound card. The reason is that unless the driver was written specifically for your sound card, you will most likely experience issues. Here are a couple examples of audio interfaces. For instance, in my studio I might use this rack-mountable Tascam US 2000, which provides me with enough inputs to record an entire drum set. If you don't need more than 2 inputs, you might choose this portable US 366. Both come with their own ASIO driver, providing ultra-low latency. Now that I've got my hardware set up, here's where Shred comes into play. Now that we've got our signal routed to the mixing board, and it's completely clean, we're going to bring up Shred within Mixcraft. First thing I will do is arm the track we wish to record on, and then click the monitor button so I can hear it play back in real time, and click the effects button and select the Shred amp simulator. And then I'll bring up its interface, choose the preset that I like to start with. And as you can tell, it's a little bit noisy, so I'm going to click the noise gate that comes with Shred. I'm also going to pull down some low end on it, tweak that preset a little bit, and it should now sound like an actual guitar amp, and I think we're ready to do some takes. Okay, now that we've got the drums, bass, and both rhythm guitars laid down, you can definitely start to hear the song take shape. The two main things left to record are the guitar solos and vocals. I leave these for last because I feel it's important that the song physically exists before the guitar solos are laid down and your vocalist begins writing lyrics. For example, some artists might come up with a guitar riff and immediately start writing lyrics. In my experience, vocal lines and melodies tend to turn out better if the writer has a full song to find hooks and grooves. Not saying this is the only way to create a good song, but it works for me. For this song, Bill and I wrote the riffs and created the entire structure before sending a rough recording to the vocalist to create the lyrics, melodies, and harmonies. So let's get started recording the guitar solos. I'm going to use my physical amplifier and mic it up with the Shure SM57, just as we did when recording our first guitar. Sticking with the idea that each guitar track needs to have a slightly different tone, I'm going to take out some highs and add some mids to make sure the solo sits on top of the other guitar parts. Again, remember when miking your cabinet to place the microphone as close as you can without touching the face of the cabinet and positioning the mic just off to one side of the cone. Now let's get a level check and record these solos. Recording vocals will be quite a bit different than the rest of the instruments we've recorded so far, in that the human voice is generally much more dynamic than guitar, bass, or drums. By dynamic, I mean that you'll have very quiet parts, very loud parts, and everything in between. To remedy this and end up with a smooth waveform that doesn't clip or dip, we will be using a hardware compressor connected to the mixing board so the signal is being compressed before being recorded by Mixcraft. We will also make sure our vocalist tries to keep an even distance from the microphone during the entire recording. These techniques are part of starting with a great source. And speaking of starting with a great source, we'll have the drummer Bill give us a quick test.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
Bill is the equivalent of a laptop microphone. We're going to replace that with a higher quality studio microphone.
You may live your life and try to deny it, but I won't buy it.
That sounds much better. So let's look at our vocal setup. When preparing to do the vocal tracks, you'll want to select a microphone that is best for the job. For example, if you're like me and you tend to sing with extreme power and constant overbearing volume, you might choose a dynamic microphone like this Shure SM58.
Wasteland will become our house.
For a more melodic vocalist who isn't as loud, you may want to choose a good condenser microphone like this AKG C214, which provides greater sensitivity for clearly recording vocalists of this type.
Come on, lay it down. I need no permission to play it loud.
For this vocal track, we've set up the AKG on a stand with a vocal isolator and a pop filter. The isolator will help keep room sounds from being recorded. Let's say we don't have a vocal isolator. Your singer stands in front of the mic, his voice is going to project past the microphone and bounce around the room and could create a reverb or echo effect. The isolator eliminates this by stopping the audio immediately after it goes beyond the microphone. The pop filter is there to reduce pops, which occur most with P's, T's, and B's. Lastly, make sure you have a decent set of headphones to avoid any music bleeding into the mic as you record. You'll also want to turn off or remove air conditioners, amps, or anything else that may cause unwanted noise in the room.
Check, testing 1, 2.
Okay, I need to get a level on you in Mixcraft, so
Check.
if you could sing something low, sing something high.
It may appear that I am chasing after a long lost dream. You may live your life and try to deny it, but I won't buy it. Is that about right?
Okay, go ahead and check. I'll put some of your vocal in your headphones.
Check, testing 1, 2. Check.
All right, if you're ready, I'm ready.
That I am chasing after a long lost dream, but your reality is not mine, and I don't need your esteem. You may live your life and try to deny it, but I won't buy it. I know what fills my heart, and I won't let your disdain rip my entire world apart. People may think I'm a fool because of what they see. I just smile while I keep on dancing on the edge of obscurity.
Eric. All right, yeah, I forgot to go up high on the second line, so if you could punch me back in on that, I'll go catch the second line of that chorus. So, because of what they see, people may think I'm a fool because of what they see. I'll get that. And so just because of what they see is where I want to be at.
I think I'm a fool because of what they see. I just smile while I keep on dancing on the edge of obscurity.
The final bit of recording on this project is going to be a group vocal part, where 5 singers will be recorded at once with a single microphone. Basically, we'll take the vocal isolator off the mic stand and position everyone evenly around one side of the microphone. You may need to adjust each person's distance according to his or her own natural volume. We'll want everyone's voice to record at the same level. The hardware compressor will help even this out as well.
People may think I'm a fool because of what they see. I just smile while I keep on dancing on the edge of obscurity.
One of the Delta Hurricanes.
All right.
All right,
19 of the best years I had.
I need no permission to play it loud.
that sounded better.
I think that's. Is that
We're all
good?
holding it.
I thought that was good.
Yeah.
Do you want to do one more that's an octave low?
Come on,
Lay it down.
I need no permission to
Play it loud.
Now it's time to move on to the mixing and mastering portions, which are also the most time consuming. Before we move into the control room, I'm going to highlight some things to keep in mind as you start to mix your project. Some of these points will vary in importance and relevance depending on what you've recorded and how you've recorded it. Mixing and mastering are two different things. Mixing is the actual mixing and tweaking of all recorded tracks. Mastering is by definition the process of transferring your final mix to a master copy that will be duplicated and distributed. I like to add a little more to that explanation. My mastering process would be to add final overall compression, EQ, and a room reverb to the master track, and finally adding ISRC codes to each track, author info to the project, and CD text when burning the master copy. Treat drums like a group of multiple instruments, not a single instrument like a guitar or vocal. It's important to bear in mind that there are a bunch of other instruments in close proximity to the one that your mic is trying to pick up. Basically, keep bleed and phasing in mind when trying to separate each drum. Remember to equalize each drum on its own EQ spectrum. For example, if you remove mids from toms and kick, but remove lows and highs from the snare, you'll get great separation to where the drums will be easily defined in the final mix. Phasing may help to remove bleed or waving cymbal sounds. If you hear a sort of swishing or waving sound from the cymbals, try reversing the phase on one of the overheads, or one of the other mics that might be picking up more of the cymbals. Phase inverting can also be necessary if one or more of your mics on the kit are facing in the opposite direction than the others. Compression and gating are the keys to tight sounding drums. Gates because you are minimalizing the sound coming from drums other than the one you want to hear. Compression to keep each hit as dynamically similar as possible. If gates cannot remove enough of the bleed, you might use a volume envelope to lower the total level on the track between hits. Listen on multiple sets of speakers after a few changes. You'll end up hearing every instrument on this project hundreds of times. If you don't, you're not taking enough time working on it. Here in the studio, I've got 3 different sets of speakers hooked up to my system. I can switch them all on or off at any time, making it possible for me to simply walk back and forth between the rooms to hear the project playing on all 3 sets. It's also a good idea to burn the project to CD and play it in your car or home stereo when you stop for the day. When I do this, I generally write down the issues I hear so I can work from a list the next day. Eventually, this will lead to a finished project that sounds good on just about any playback device. Good enough is not good enough. If you are sick of the song or your ears turn to mush, quit for the day. Most changes made after ear mush sets in are later considered no good and get thrown out. Once mixing is finished and you have your levels, EQ, effects, and compression all set for each track, and you've listened to the track on multiple devices and speaker sets, we can now master the final mix by adding a multi-band compressor, 31-band EQ, and room reverb to the master track. I like to treat the mixing process as if I were mixing a live band. Each track gets treated with the same basic steps. So there's your kick drum sound without anything on it. But you can hear a little bit of bleed from the other drums and cymbals and things. So let me loop a section and then we'll start adding the effects again. See right there, by adding that gate, I've basically pulled out most of the bleed. And my first EQ which I've pulled out most of the mids, left most of the low end and high end in there. And I had a second EQ in there to further pull out some frequencies I didn't like. I raised that sensitivity to 24 dB, so the sliders are a lot more sensitive. Then stick the compressor on it, and finally a second gate to pull out anything else that's still bleeding. So as you can hear, there's no bleed, and it's a thumpy kick drum sound. So now we've got a decent kick drum sound by adding the gates and equalizers and compression. So we'll move on to the snare drum. And you can really hear the bleed of the hi-hat and cymbals through this microphone. So we're going to try to get that out. First thing I'll do is add this basic 10-band EQ, pull down the lows. Snare drums don't generate 32 and 63, that's too low, so the only thing that would do is cause bleed, so I'm going to pull those out. And I add the gate. As you can now hear, there's hardly any bleed at all. Everything else has disappeared. We'll stick the compressor on it and a little bit of reverb. Add back in some of my highs on the parametric. And there you have a decent snare drum sound by adding equalizers and gates and compression. You can really hear the rest of that drum set bleeding through as that tom is hit. But it's definitely the prominent sound. So if we add the gate, you can still hear a little bit, but that's not going to be enough to interfere once the entire mix is playing at once. Now let's work on the sound. Activate that EQ. And again, similar to a kick drum, I've pulled out a lot of the mids, left the lows and highs. Activate the second one, which again, I've set the sensitivity to 24 dB and pulled out some of the frequencies that I thought didn't sound great. And additionally, I used the TV parametric to really hone in on some of those frequencies that might be causing problems on different stereo speaker sets. And pull those right out. And lastly, the compressor. There we've got a decent tom. Let's move on to rack tom 2. Again, you can hear the bleed, and you might notice on the track itself, on the object, I've created volume envelopes to pull out the track everywhere where there's no hit. So let's say right here, you can see there's a couple of cymbal hits or something right there. I've pulled the volume down to nothing, which helps out the gate. So the gate's basically working from here to here. Let's add that in. Gate doing a good job. Let's add that EQ. That pulls it way down. Add that parametric. Pulled out a nice big sweep of the mids. And the compressor. And since I can hear a little bit of that hi-hat coming through again because of the EQing that I've done, we're adding a second gate. And then once we add back in the submix track effects, we've got a decent sounding tom. You can really hear the bleed of that cymbal hit right after Bill plays the tom. So let's see what we can do about that with the gate. Now that's brought it down to almost nothing. Little EQ. Again, with the no mids and leaving the highs and lows basically where they are. Add the compressor, tighten it up. And then once we put back in these effects on the submix track itself, you've got a decent sounding tom with no bleed. Okay, let's move on to the last floor tom. You can hear that cymbal bleeding through. A little bit of snare in between each hit. So we will stick that gate on here. See if we can eliminate that. Okay. And I'll put the equalizer on, the 31 band. Second one, to pull out some of the frequencies that I think don't need to be there, maybe causing issues. And with the parametric this time, I kind of rolled off the entire lows and the entire highs to pull out any flubbing of the speakers, too much low end, or cymbals bleeding through in the high end. And finally the compressor. And you can see this compressor working as the drum is hit. I like to have a very high ratio and a very low threshold on drums. And a little bit longer of a release so you can still hear the tone of the drum after the hit. And then we'll add the effects back into the submix track. And then let me play what we've got so far, and that's going to be the kick, snare, and toms. Give you an idea what this section sounds like. All right, that's starting to sound pretty nice. The last part of the drum kit will be the overhead microphones, and what I'll do is basically take a 10-band EQ, roll off the low end a little bit to minimize the drums bleeding through those microphones. Then I will pan one of them left and pan one right to create a nice stereo separation. All right, now watch what happens when I activate this equalizer. And I put that compressor on there to keep everything even. When you put up overheads, they may be closer to one cymbal than they are another, or the hi-hat sits lower. And when you use that compressor, it's going to try to even everything out, as if they were all the same distance from the microphone. So we'll add that second overhead, and as you can see, they are panned left and right, about 70% each. Get nice stereo separation. You can hear the hi-hat on one side, the ride cymbal on the other. The entire drum set. Now that we have a decent sounding drum set, and don't worry, we'll mix more on that a little bit later, we're going to move on to guitars. In a submix track, I have placed both rhythm guitar tracks and the bass track. So let's check those out. Which that's a pretty good sounding bass on its own, but that's not the tone I want for this song. So I'm going to add a compressor to to kind of smooth it out, so no matter what notes I've played on the bass, they're all going to be kind of the same level. Again, you can see that compressor working. It's constantly on, which means it's always compressing, bringing levels up, pulling levels down. And I want a sort of distorted sound on the bass for this one. So I've used this amp simulator. First 31 band EQ. As you can see here, the EQ is similar to a kick drum or a tom, but I've added some more of the low end, anywhere from 31 on up to 80, where the kick drum's main low end is going to be around 100, 125, 80. So you don't want to cross the two. You don't want to give them both a boost at the same frequency. They're going to clash with each other. And on this second equalizer, I've pulled out frequencies that I thought didn't sound so great. So that tightens it right up. Same with the parametric. I've added, sort of rounded off on the high mids and rounded off on the lows. And then finally another compressor, yes, yet another compressor, to smooth everything out after it's been processed by the rest of the effects. And there's our bass tone. So let's move on to the first guitar, which was recorded with my actual guitar preamp, a power amp, and a 412 cabinet. Now at first listen you might think there's nothing wrong with that. It just sounds like a distorted heavy metal guitar. So I'm going to pull out some lows with a 10-band equalizer on this guitar because you don't want to pull out mid-range on a guitar and leave lows and highs. That's what you pretty much do with toms and kick drums and maybe even bass guitar. But with a guitar, mid-range is going to be what cuts through the speakers. Just like when you're playing live, mid-range is going to be what cuts through the PA system and makes your guitar heard over top of everything else. So I've pulled out 32, and that's going to stop it from thumping and having more low end than, say, the bass guitar or the kick drum. You don't want that. Let's play a little bit of it. And here we're pulling out frequencies from 20 to 50 hertz. Add that compressor, which again, it's almost always crunching down on that signal. And a little bit of reverb. That guitar didn't need a whole lot of processing, in my opinion anyway. I like my preamp and I like the way it sounds. Does not sound like a heavy metal guitar. Sounds like a comical guitar. But if we add shred, here's what you get. And shred's got a noise gate built right into it, and reverb, treble master, delay. You can move the microphone around in the cabinet, so it's very versatile, and I think it sounds really good. So basically all I did after shred is add the compressor. Again, always crunching down on the signal to make sure everything stays even. And that's about it for that guitar track. So the first thing I'll add is a compressor, just to smooth things out, so some of the harder picking is not louder than some of the softer picking, things like that. Add this 10-band EQ, and again pull out the lows. some of the major highs to keep some of that cymbal bleed out of there. And I adjusted some of the mid-range to make it sound a little bit different than the first guitar that was recorded through the cabinet, because you want to have a different tone or it's not going to sit on top of the other one. It's just going to sound like the same guitar and they're going to mesh together. You won't be able to pick out the guitar solo. So we changed that a little bit. And I like to use this classic chorus, but I set it to a preset called Vocal Spread, which basically makes the guitar sound much more stereo. It sounds very large, very huge. And you can use that on vocals as well. And then the Mixcraft Pro Studio reverb I put on the solo, and the classic delay. So now we have this. And at first that may sound like too much delay, too much reverb, but once you mix that in with the other guitars, drums, vocals, bass, it buries all that and your guitar just sounds large and lively. So now we've got our basic foundation. We've got drums, we've got bass and guitars, and what we're going to work on now is going to be vocals. And right now I've got Todd's lead vocals inside this submix track. There's quite a few tracks in there, but they're all basically going to be affected and EQ'd the same. The reason I would have multiple tracks would be overlapping parts that might take a slightly different effect or slightly different EQing.
Chasing after a long lost dream, but your reality is not mine.
As you can tell, it's a very nice sounding recording. That AKG microphone did a great job, and there's no bleed. He was wearing headphones. I wasn't playing the music through any speakers or anything. So we've got a very clean vocal recording to work with. So it's not going to take a whole lot other than I'm going to use the 10-band equalizer to pull out lows, 32, 63 completely, and half of 125. And what that does is make sure that Todd's P's and B's and other things that may cause pops and low end are not going to have more low end in them than, say, your bass drum or your bass guitar, because then it just doesn't sound like a professional recording. So we'll add that equalizer, and before I add the delay back in, I'm going to pull up the effects for the submix track itself. And I've added another equalizer doing the same thing, basically pulling out the lows, tweaking some of the mids, tweaking some of the highs, compression, of course. And I've added the classic chorus to give a vocal spread. Spread it out. A little bit of stereo effect makes the vocals sound huge, and a little bit of the Mixcraft reverb. And I like just a little bit of the reverb with not much high frequency damping. I like to hear the S's and things reverb out as well. So we'll let you hear that.
Chasing after a long lost dream, but your reality.
Now you may think that sounds MIDI, like there's not enough low end opinions like that, but when you mix that in with the rest of the band, the rest of the music, it sounds much more sitting down in the mix as well as on top of the mix because of the mids still existing. So it's going to sit on top of the mix and sound very nice. So we'll put that delay back on there and play just a little bit of the track with the music. And you can only hear that delay and reverb in certain points of the vocal where he may stop singing and it gives a little bit of a highlight, gives it some emphasis. So far our vocals are sounding very nice. And as I mentioned, these other vocal tracks are going to be just about the same thing. but we will loop down here where the chorus is and show you how he's done harmonies to himself. Basically, he records a track, goes back, and I put that vocal along with the music into his headphones so he can then sing another track with a harmony on it. So we'll give you his first track with just his lead vocal and the chorus on it.
People may think I'm a fool.
Then we'll add his second one in there,
People may think I'm a fool.
which is an octave low. We'll add the third one,
People may think I'm a fool.
which is an actual third or fifth, or jumping between the two.
People may think I'm a fool because of what they see.
So with all four of those in there, you've got a 4-part harmony. Makes for a very full chorus, especially with that chorus plug-in on there, creating the vocal spread effect. Makes it sound huge. So we'll play a little bit of the chorus there for you with the music. Okay, that's starting to sound like a full song. Sounds pretty good to me, but again, there's going to be lots of tweaking later on before we actually do the mastering. Okay, we're going to move on to a submix track, which I call Vocals Group. And the reason I call it that is because it's full of tracks that we recorded using 5 guys singing at the same time. We wanted this song to have a sort of effect where there was lots of people singing this chorus at the end of the song. So basically what we've got is a vocals group submix track and a whole bunch of tracks under that.
People may think I'm a fool because of what they see.
So obviously that's not Todd, that's 5 guys who pretty much can't sing. But it does sound like a bunch of guys standing around singing the chorus. So once we add that EQ back in there, take out some of the lows so it doesn't sound so dry, add the compressor and the reverb and the chorus, it's going to sound a little bit better.
People may think I'm a fool because of what they see.
And then at the same time we went back and recorded another track with the same 5 guys an octave lower.
People may think I'm a fool.
So if we play both of those at the same time, it sounds even more full than it did before.
People may think I'm a fool because
Starting to sound like 10 guys singing instead of 5. And I've repeated that over here and here. And we'll move down. And these group vocal tracks, as you can see, I've got them panned right, left, center, left, right. And what these are, this is just Todd.
I'm a fool because of what they see.
And he's singing the same notes that the 5 of us were at the same time. And what it's going to do is kind of keep everybody in tune, in key, so we don't sound that bad like we're so out of key. And it also adds that big stereo effect because I've panned him left, right, and put one in the center. So we'll play left, right, center of the first 3 for you.
I'm a fool because of what they see.
And I did not record him one time and then copy the track onto 2 more tracks and then just simply pan them. That wouldn't really work because they would all be exactly the same. In order to get that stereo effect and that really big effect, he actually sang that 3 times and then we panned it. And these next 2,
I'm a fool.
it's basically just the octave lower, just like we did with the group, and panned left and right so we get that big sound. Now if we listen to everybody together,
I'm a fool because of what
So instead of 5 guys singing the part and then 5 guys singing the octave lower part, giving us the 10 guys, we've now got 12 or 14 guys with Todd's vocals added into that. He's also singing the 2 octaves. And it sounds huge. It sounds very full, especially when the entire song is playing. It's very full sounding. And that's the effect we were going for. It was actually Todd's idea to do that, and it was a great idea. I think it makes the song stand out and gives it a little bit of charisma. So we're going to go down to these other tracks, which we haven't really highlighted yet. Solo that sub mix again. And here, the group also, again, does these parts where we do the 2 different octaves. It's just a different part of the song.
Lay it down. Play it loud.
And then again we have Todd coming in, pan left, pan right, pan center.
Lay it down.
Doing his part 3 times,
Play it loud.
not copying a single. You want to do it 3 times.
Lay it down.
And then he did the same thing with the lower octave.
Lay it down.
When you add in the group vocals,
Lay it down. Play it loud.
so we'll unsolo this track and listen to everything together, all the vocals, guitars, bass, drums, and see what we've got. All right, to me that sounds like it's coming together very nicely. Everything's sitting down in the mix. Nothing's louder than something else. The reverb is making everything come together nicely on each instrument. The compression is doing its job, pulling everything down that's too loud, lifting things up that aren't quite loud enough. The vocal spread is making the vocals sound huge to me, which is very good. So the next thing that we're going to do is go to the master track and add a multi-band compressor to give the entire recording more thump and more presence and more liveliness. So we'll go over to the master track, click the effects button, and pull up this broadcast multi-band compressor, which has low compression, mid compression, high compression, and it comes with all kinds of presets, so you can just kind of select something and see if that makes your recording sound better. But I like to adjust threshold and ratio and gain and everything myself. So we'll play this a little bit and then turn the compressor on and see if you can hear the difference. Definitely raises the volume, raises the liveliness. The highs are sharper. The mids are clearer, the lows are more thumpy without actually being too much for your speakers. So the last thing I'll do is add this Acoustica Pro Studio reverb, which is an excellent room reverb, and it's going to make the recording sound like everyone was in the same room playing at the same time. We've all got the same type of reverb on us. Now that effect is a little more subtle while the song's playing, but it does smooth the whole thing out, almost like a compression, because each instrument is getting the same reverb. I'd like to explain a little bit about why I like to use a spectrum analyzer on my master track. First thing I'll do is go to the master track effects and pull up the spectrum analyzer. And here you can get a visual idea of what your audio is doing. If you're not quite sure just by listening to it, if there's too much low end or too much high end, if things are not even, then you can kind of get an idea by opening this up. So I'm going to play the little bit of the song, and you can see that all of our frequencies from low to high are basically fairly even. Another great thing about using the spectrum analyzer is that you can see your compression evening things out. Without the compression, you'll have much more dramatic and drastic lines. But you need to be careful, because now that we've got the multi-band compressor also on our main mix, now when you adjust one instrument, it's going to affect the rest of the mix. For example, if you listen to your project on a car stereo on a CD or something like that, and you think, the bass guitar doesn't quite have enough low end in it, and you go add the low end to the bass guitar, that's going to affect this multi-band compressor, and it's going to pull the low end down on everything else. So you'll suddenly start thinking, geez, I don't remember turning the low end down on my kick drum or something like that. So you have to be careful when mixing after you've applied these mastering effects. And again, the spectrum analyzer will help you to make sure everything stays smooth with each change. So that's about it. If you keep these steps in mind when working on your own projects, you should be able to achieve similar results. Like anything else, ending up with a great final mix will take practice, patience, dedication, and training your ears to pick up the smallest imperfections, which may not be noticeable to a general audience, but will be noticeable to you in the long run. One of the worst and most common things that happen to engineers and producers is to call a project finished, duplicate 1,000 CDs, distribute them to the public, and sometime later you start noticing things you wish you would have fixed or changed. So make 100% sure that you're happy with the final mix before calling it a wrap. Personally, I always bring in at least 4 other musicians and producers with well-trained ears to listen and give feedback. I hope these tips and tricks help you to create some great rock and metal mixes. I'm Eric Van Landingham for Acoustica, and I guess that's a wrap. See you.